Next policy, recommended draft policy ARIN 2016-9, Streamline merger and acquisition transfers. This is a recommended draft policy. As such, the AC has found it to be suitable for inclusion in the number resource policy, potentially suitable for inclusion in the number resource policy manual. They could, after this meeting, send this to last call, and it could end up in the policy manual before the next time we see each other. So it's fairly important to comment if you have a view on this. I will do the staff introduction since it's a recommended draft policy. It was proposed in December 2016 as ARIN Policy Proposal 234. The AC Shepherds are John Springer and Leif Sawyer. Leif Sawyer. Yep. Still something defective up there. Okay. So has not been presented at a public policy meeting or public policy consultation. It advanced to recommended draft policy status based on discussion on the mailing list and the work of the AC. It's in your discussion guide. This is the discussion guide. You all have it. Okay, so staff understanding. Draft Policy 2016-9 allows for organizations to submit an A2 merger and acquisition specified transfer without the expectation that any of the resources will be revoked due to lack of justification for the resource's continued use. This draft policy eliminates any wording that might suggest that resources may have been divested by the organization seeking to update the information through the A2 specified transfer policy. Staff comments. If the intent of this policy is to ensure that the internet number resources will not be subject to a needs-based assessment, then staff suggests it say that plainly in the text. It could result in a higher bar for approval of transfers. The original text had the language independently verifiable, and that and the previous comment have both been adjusted. So I don't think that's now a relevant remark. And then nor the first one for that matter. And then the third comment was, we noted that it would be more accurate if the policy language was slightly reworded, and these have been all incorporated. That's the legal assessment. Does not create material legal issues, presuming the staff comments are accommodated as they have been. And then resource impact. It's a fairly routine resource impact. We can do the policy within 3 months should after ratification by the ARIN Board of Trustees. We update as usual, the typical things for small policy, updated guidelines and internal procedures, and the staff training. So, this concludes the staff introduction, and I will now have the presentation by John Springer. It's having a finicky day. Press slowly and hard, and it needs coffee or something.
Everything needs coffee. Try the other one.
Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm John Springer. I'm here to present the AC version of this. I have a slide that emphasizes the staff and legal review. As part of our procedural activities, we have to go through a number of things. So in your book, all of this stuff is written down in plain English on page 10, 12, and 38. 38 is the NRPM. 10 is the actual policy text that we'll be talking about. And 12 is the staff and legal review. I have a tendency to not to want to read this all to you, so I'm going to be going through this on a kind of a periphrasis basis. But I did want to emphasize that we have taken into consideration all of staff's concerns and that they have been incorporated into the text. And you can follow along in that process in the manual. Merger. This is strictly about merger and acquisitions in the 8.2 section. So the assertion is that as part of the process of doing a mergers and acquisition, organizations involved in this process end up having to re-justify addresses that have already been justified once. The net result of this is an undesirable thing in that some organizations are electing to leave the records in the registry in a now incorrect state, mainly in the name of the defunct organization. There used to be good reasons for this, but there don't appear to be any such good reasons anymore. Supporting points. Again, there's some more formal wording for these things in the manual, but the resources have been justified once by both parties. Other than in this case, ARIN doesn't require justification unless an organization is asking for more space, which is not really happening when an 8.2 merger and acquisition is taking place. But as has been stated, this does result, seemingly, in bad registry data. I'm going to be going through some operations upon the policy text here in the next slides. But just as an introductory comment, the way that the previous policy text was worded, it had the effect of making the environment really murky. So hopefully this is going to clear this up. Also, I will offer for your consideration the idea that chain of custody, particularly when we're talking about registry data, may be more important than auditing before addresses. Okay, so if you flip to 38, the first effect of the new policy text is that we're going to delete the fifth bullet point in NRPM 8.1. And it essentially says, show that you've acquired the assets that use the resources that are about to be transferred. The previous text also includes a requirement that ARIN maintain a list. We're going to throw that out. As part of the staff and legal, further on in the effects, we're going to be deleting the final paragraph in 8.2. This has the effect of doing a number of things that are not quite clear. So this is past policy that we're proposing to delete. It essentially says that ARIN will proceed with processing requests even if the resources of the combined organizations exceed what can be justified under current policy. This was modified in February of this year as part of the addition of the 8.5 transfer wording. So the whole business has just gotten completely unclear. It doesn't say that ARIN will finish processing transfer requests until some bar has been cleared. So anyway, we're going to be getting rid of that. Staff requested that we insert this statement that one effect of the policy is that no additional needs-based assessment will take place during the scope of this 8.2 process. Rationale obviously being that they've already been assessed previously. It is stated in this way because we didn't want to preclude, another way we could have said this is that these resources will receive no further needs-based assessment. We didn't want that. We wanted to be able to have it so that if these resources get transferred later in a context where somebody else is receiving additional resources, that they would still be subject to a needs-based assessment. Our policy effect 1 was to delete a bullet point saying that you had to show that you had acquired the assets that the resources were attached to. We're adding that back in, just without the other criteria that you need a list, that Aaron's going to maintain a list. And this is in a section that is a list of conditionals, and we're adding an additional conditional, which is an or, to the effect, show that you acquired the whole organization. So you either show that you acquired the resource, the assets that are attached to the resources, or you show that you acquired the whole organization. And policy effect 4 is to remove the final cited paragraph from 8.2, which may have had, it's unclear entirely. I'm John Springer, a member of the ARIN Advisory Council. I'm not speaking for the Advisory Council, and I'm not speaking for ARIN staff. But in my opinion, it is unclear where ARIN derived the authority to be conducting the needs assessment that was taking place during 8.2 mergers and acquisitions. But if it did occur here, then we're removing it. Here's the paragraph that's being deleted for your convenience. It's also on page 38 in the NRPM in your manual. Questions?
That's an interesting question, Mark. So this is, again, a recommended draft policy. This may be the last time it is discussed at a meeting before potentially being adopted, which is why it's very important to get feedback in now. I know you're all rushing. So the second policy after the social gets a little bit of a rear microphone, please.
Joe Oliveri, root level technology. I agree with the policy. Just want to put that out there.
Perfect, thank you. Side microphone.
Donnie Roisman with SoftLayer IBM. I agree with the policy as written, and I appreciate the efforts to streamline the transfer process 8.2 and to help make the database more accurate. So thank you.
Thank you. For her rear microphone.
Owen DeLong, Akamai Aaron AC. I support the policy as written. The explanation, I think, was a bit confusing, but the policy is actually pretty straightforward. We're basically deleting the additional needs test that was occurring on 8.2 transfers and deleting the text that says you may have to work with ARIN staff about returning, transferring, or otherwise disposing of excess space. It doesn't seem that that text was doing much good lately, and the unintended consequences of transfers not getting recorded, I think, was doing more harm. So even though I'm one of the people that wrote the original language, and I'm a strong proponent of needs basis, as everyone knows, and not in favor of completely eliminating it at this time, I do think in this particular case it makes a lot of sense and we should move forward.
Okay. Side microphone.
Mark Lindsay, Avenue 4. I got a couple of comments on the draft text and then a broader observation. One is you say no addition. I'm in support of the policy generally. It's a good policy, good directional. I like it. But two areas of improvement, I think. One is the additional needs-based justification. Why the word additional? Why not any? Additional, I think, adds a little lack of clarity. We've had one already. This is really just about doing any more needs justification for 8.2. So I think an improvement would be any needs justification in the process of 8.2s. The other one is the, you say recipient must show that they have acquired the entire entity. So I want to explore that a little bit. Why not say the entire entity and a controlling interest? Because every M&A activity isn't always a full acquisition. It might be a controlling interest, which in every other context is sufficient to demonstrate an acquisition of a company. So think about expanding a bit to reflect a true acquisition, which is a controlling interest and not just the entire set of shareholder interests. And the third point I'll make, I got one more point to make if you want to address those two.
Why don't you go with the first two there before they get too far behind?
So additional. The original request from ARIN staff was without additional, but the original author's intent was additional. And as I've stated, the resources had already been through a needs assessment needs-based assessment in the case where each of the organizational participants in the merger and acquisition had that done. So it is an additional needs assessment, just as a matter of fact.
Well, no, my only observation is the way it's written here. It says will not be subject to any additional needs-based assessment during the process of 8.2.
And we wanted to have it during the process so as not to disqualify it from going through a needs assessment later in the case where perhaps was going through an 8.3 transfer.
I understand. Okay, but I think just as a drafting point, I would say, because you're limiting it to 8.2s and it doesn't seem like it's bootstrapping 8.3s. I think the additional suggests that there was something initially in the 8.2 processing. Not a big point, but I think it just should say
We'll
in it.
consider your comments.
Yeah.
How about that?
Okay. And then what about the second point about not the entire company, but a controlling, in addition to the entire company, controlling interest?
So the way that the wording is added in the conditionals is that you would either require the assets that the resources were attached to, routers, etc., or a controlling interest, or demonstrate that you've acquired the entire organization. You're asking whether or not we think it would be a good idea to add a third or maybe a dozen?
So no, I think, so all I'm saying is that in B, you have the asset continuity test. A is two-part. One is the asset continuity test, and the other is acquisition of the organization. And all I'm saying is the definition of acquisition, as opposed to it being the entire company, just make the acquisition the controlling interest of the company. That's
Well,
all.
I won't be able to make that determination myself, so I guess we'll have to have a chat with our legal as well.
Okay.
And
We can take that feedback.
the third point I wanted to make is that I do think that the policy ambiguity about returning resources has imposed some impediments on legacy holders coming forward to update the registry. But I also think the RSA is a substantial impediment to that process as well. So you impose a set of conditions on a party who has no contractual relationship with ARIN. You want to condition their updating the registry to formalizing their relationship under a contract that has considerable terms and conditions. So I think this policy addresses a portion of that impediment. The second portion of that still exists, and they have to go through an RSA and forces them to have a contractual relationship with ARIN. Earlier in the POC validation discussion, there was this notional idea about updating the registry for legacy holders, and they could choose not to have a contractual relationship because it's serving a purpose of improving the accuracy of the registry. And that, on balance, was a good thing to potentially abandon the obligation for them to enter into their contract. I think that if you added a second policy, another policy to do that, I think you would dramatically reduce the occurrences of legacy holders who voluntarily choose not to update the registry.
I think John wanted to address that point, and others. Go for it.
So let's actually, now I'm up to 3 comments queued, so we try to do them in order. And I'll take them in order. The first one is, with regard to your non-comment as a non-AC member and regarding the authority of ARIN to conduct a needs assessment, and that perhaps you doubt whether that was ever valid. To be clear, we administer the registry according to the policies you make. And those policies apply to all the resources in the registry. And if you make a policy that says there's a needs assessment, then it applies. And if you make a policy that doesn't say there's a needs assessment, then there isn't one. But it's unequivocal that we have the ability to administer the registry according to the community's policies. If someone doesn't like that, they don't need to use the registry, but we try to make it useful to everyone. So we have no doubts, at least as an organization, of our ability to apply whatever policy this community develops to all the entries in the registry. I guess I'll go to the second point that Mark points out, because it's somewhat related. So we do allow an organization to update its contacts without entering into any agreement. The board has said we will continue to provide services for legacy people with the services that they were receiving when ARIN was formed. They can update their organization. They can update their contacts. The challenge with allowing an update of an organization without entering into a contractual agreement is that it is quite possible in that process where someone asserts that it isn't actually legally the case. And so it's one thing to update the contacts where someone says it's the same organization, or even if it's been through a rename. If it's a legal change of entity, then at this time we do not provide the ability for them to carry those rights over. We don't recognize that necessarily there's any obligation to do so. If they have rights in the registry, that's fine, but all of the policies the registry apply. The board has instructed us to allow people to update their contact information, but we have not received further instruction. I would take that up with the board member if you want parties to be able to go through 822 processing and mergers and acquisitions and still not enter into an agreement. That's a pretty substantial lift.
No,
And we do dangerously start getting a bit out of scope of discussion on hand.
Right,
Happy
on
to
this
have that
policy.
discussion on this
So
policy.
it's a different question.
I'm
It's in
happy
the
to have that
policy, though.
discussion at an open mic or otherwise.
I'm with you, but it is in the I mean, the policy says you must have an RSA, right? That's a part of the policy.
It does say the new entity must sign an
Correct.
RSA covered by all resources.
Correct.
And I think John's point is that it's a part of the policy and not a staff question.
Right.
It's in the policy today. So I think it's a policy point
Right.
to say that we think that I believe that if your goal is to get more legacy holders to update the registry as a reflection of normal corporate activity, that you ought to eliminate the RSA as a requirement for 8.2s or substantially change it in a way that you can just get the minimum protections ARIN needs in that context.
That's currently contrary to the position taken by the ARIN organization. Okay? And so that needs to be addressed at the board level before policy could be changed, because it's, even if the policy's changed, we still would seek an RSA right now. And then the last point was, the last point was in regard to the statements regarding a needs assessment having already been conducted on the resources. We don't, we look at the NRPM and we generally talk about the requirements to process the request that's being asked. And so I understand the AC's, there was a little dialogue back and forth about not an additional needs assessment should be applied, but only for the purposes of processing this request. It's a fairly Byzantine structure to get the point across. It's not clear whether trying to associate the ability to do a needs assessment or not in policy with the block. Like, this block has been through one but can't be through another one. Unless it goes through one of these, then this block can. We actually don't associate the needs assessment property with a block or not. What we associate with is with the request. And the simple language would be, in processing an 8.2 request, no needs assessment will be performed, period. This was discussed with the AC. The AC went with a phrase that it thought was more exact given the history of the block. It's not the practice in the rest of the NRPM, but it's the language that was chosen.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. I believe, because we did there, that you were next, sir, on the front.
Brent McIntosh, Cable and Wireless. I just want to say I'm in full agreement with the policy. I think the proposed recommendations make it more streamlined for M&A transfers. And from a Caribbean perspective, any such efficiencies are pretty much welcome, as we're in a landscape of where M&As are pretty much common these days. Thank you.
I'd ask if you wish to speak on this topic that you approach a mic, because we are rapidly running out of microphone slot people for your microphone.
Rob Seastrom, New Star and ARIN AC, and I was the one that wrote the original draft of this proposal. My intent was to eliminate 2 points of friction in having accurate WHOIS data, and that is, I believe, is a compelling community interest to have WHOIS data that's as correct as possible. The first one was the scary language about ARIN taking back space, which served as a disincentive. The other was the language that spoke to a redo on the needs assessment, particularly end users as opposed to ISPs tend not to have the kind of exact data that would satisfy an ARIN audit readily at hand. And so both of those points tended to scare organizations off from updating the data. And I wanted to get rid of those points of friction so that there was no longer a reason for them to not update the data. to the gentleman speaking on the mic at the right a moment ago about the RSA. John's already explained why that's something that the board would frown upon, but I think that this moves us substantially in the correct direction even without those changes.
I know
Thank
you authored it, but are you still in favor? Or?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. Please approach. This is the last call for microphones. Please approach the microphones. We will be closing after this comment. Front microphone.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire. I support the policy as written. And we're going to go into the next phase as a recommended draft, which is to see what the sway of the room is. The policy is not perfect. I'm sure there's some things that could be tweaked here and there, but the policy gets us a major step forward, and I don't want to see us wait another entire cycle of ARIN meetings to make more changes to this policy. I just want to see it move forward as it is. We can always write another policy to do the next thing, but this really helps a big issue that we've had now. I think this has been brought up in 6 or 7 meetings in a row relating to 8.2s. Let's just clean it up as best we can and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. The microphones are now closed, and our last comments will go to remote participation.
Thank you. Christoph Blecker, Walt Disney Company, is in support of the policy as written.
Thank you. All right, that ends the comments, so thank you to John for the presentation. I will ask my poll counters to get in positions, but first just a quick test after social. Everybody raise one hand right now in the room. I mean everybody. Let's just test. Good. So we know, there's a few here that aren't playing. Come on, we know that hand works, so you can now lower your hand. Sorry, very well. Very good, Jason, showing proper procedure, waiting to be told. So this is a recommended draft policy. We are going to ask the question whether or not the community believes the advisory council should continue to move this policy along and proceed with it. I will ask all those in the room that are in favor to raise that hand you just raised nice and high and keep it up until I ask you to lower it. Online, please indicate your preference now. This is our last recommended draft policy of the session, so it could be your last chance to raise your hand and make a mark. Again, if you're in the room, you're entitled to indicate one way or another. Just another few seconds. Thank you. You can lower them. And if you are opposed, please raise your hand nice and high. Okay. All those that I believe were none, unless they're in the corner, lower. One moment, please, while we tabulate the results, including online. And then I believe we are going to potentially be a minute or two early for break. Snacks are always good. Never go hungry at an ARIN meeting. It's always a promise. Just a reminder, though, too, at just before the end of the day, we do have an open microphone, so some of the issues that we were kind of saying may have been a little out of scope, but are happy to discuss. That's an excellent opportunity to bring them up, and we are happy to speak. But on the matter of 2016-9, Streamline merger and acquisition transfers, show of hands combined online and in person, 61 in favor, goose egg against, 129 in the room and online. Thank you very much for this feedback, which will be presented to the AC immediately.